Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Denver-based jazz drummer, composer, and educator Brennen Schedler. He opened up about his new 2021 CD Keep Steppin Down, and he is busy in Denver in the realms of jazz, blues, rock, punk, metal, and folk. He's primarily a freelance musician, busy with a variety of projects and endeavors on a regular basis. Enjoy the story.
Hey, thanks for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for your interest in, I'm hoping, the record.
Yeah, without a doubt. Speaking of Keep Steppin Down, I want to kind of get into this new 2021 CD release. And first and foremost, it's coming out during a pandemic, what we thought was getting better, and now we're back in that ambiguous zone. But still, it's an avenue to communicate with the fans, which hasn't happened for quite a while. How do you feel about this release during this particular time?
I think that, like, everything going on artistically right now is kind of really going to be seen as important. Like, I'm not sure if it's necessarily seen that way at the moment, but, I mean, just the fact that, like, I recorded this in November 2020, you know, like, I had just gotten vaccinated and, you know, things were really weird. Well, it was November 2020, so I forget if I had just gotten vaccinated or what the heck exactly was going on, but I remember it just being, like, really weird in the studio. You know, we all had masks on, and I couldn't even really order pizza to the studio to feed all the cats on the record. I think that all the art that's coming out right now is really important because a lot of these songs I actually wrote during the pandemic. I feel like even though they have something to do with my recovery, a lot of them also have to do with this sense of, like, feeling kind of alone and scared and uncertain, but also feeling like trying to catch that sense of hopefulness at the same time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. What was the overall voice that you wanted to capture in this? What, like, the artistic purpose? Do you feel like you nailed that now that it's materialized and it's out?
Yeah, so I do feel really good about it. What I was going for is I was writing about my journey through recovery from drug addiction. And obviously there's no words on this record, right? And a lot of people search for meaning in words, but I feel like for me, after listening to the record in full all the way through, it has the emotions and the sentiment of what it felt like for me to go from a high schooler just kind of having fun and thinking, oh, this is what everyone does, to the realization that, you know, I think my life is out of control, and then finally coming into a place where I was ready to enter this new phase of my life where recovery was the most important thing, and I was ready to really pursue music with a clear mind.
So what do you ultimately want the listener to get from this? You know, it's a pretty big commitment with all the choices when they download or buy this album. How do you want them to feel about it?
Honestly, I think for the first listen through, and I know this is kind of a funny answer, but I want them to feel a little bit confused. Because, like, if you listen to it from top to bottom, right, the first tune, Keep Steppin Down, is, like, a pretty swingin', like, it's got a bunch of 2/5s with modal centers. Like, it's kind of a swingin', almost straight-ahead-ish tune. And then you go into this ballad, and then all of a sudden there's, like, an ECM-style song, and then there's the most drunk-sounding blues that I could record, then, like, a modal 3/4 tune, and then a modal tune in 7. So I kind of wanted the listener to be like, where is this guy coming from? You know, what are his influences? And I wanted the first listen through to be, wow, there's a lot of different stuff going on here. You know, what's the connecting thread? And then I wanted, through more listens through, for the listener to be able to develop, like, this is how I believe these songs relate. You know, because for me, obviously, there's a way that they relate through my journey, but I like the idea of the listener, like, figuring out for themselves, how do these songs actually relate to each other?
So talk to me about growing up in Colorado, kind of how you got the jazz bug and all this became your life as it is now.
Growing up in Colorado, actually, funnily enough, in 5th grade, we all have to do music, and I actually started on clarinet. I was playing clarinet in my 5th grade band, and my friend was actually playing in the percussion section, and we didn't even have snare drums. Like, he was on a practice pad. And I remember being like, man, I hate that I have to suck on this reed I hate that I have to use my lungs. I just want to hit things. So I kind of told my mom, and she was like, okay, we'll get you drum lessons. And I started taking drum lessons. And in middle school, I joined band to play drums. In 7th grade, I had this moment where I thought, you know what, I don't want to do music anymore. I actually quit band. And my band teacher basically emailed me, and he's like, hey, can we please talk before you quit band? And I was like, okay. And his name was Caleb Starbuck. He took me into his office, and he was like, hey, 2 things. One, I'm worried that the band's not going to sound good without you because you're the only one who can play drum set, and we're trying to do like a Beatles tribute thing. And 2, I think even if you don't pursue this as a career, I think that music is really important, and I can see the joy in your face when you're really in the zone and in the pocket, and I don't want you to give this up. And I kind of gave in, and I was like, okay, fine, I'll do 1 more year. So I did 1 more year, and then I fell back in love with it. In high school, I did band, and funnily enough, I, in high school, got into jazz through the Jimi Hendrix Experience, which is not jazz, obviously. I heard Mitch Mitchell playing, who's the drummer in that band, and I thought, man, this is so much different than, you know, the Led Zeppelin sound, the AC/DC sound, the modern rock sound, you know, like Dave Grohl. Like, what makes this drummer sound so different? And I did a bunch of research into Mitch Mitchell, and I found out that he was listening to Elvin Jones and Tony Williams and, you know, Max Roach and all these jazz drummers, and that he really wanted to be a jazz drummer. And so that got me into, okay, who's this Elvin Jones guy? Who's this Tony Williams guy? And at that point, I checked out A Love Supreme. And I remember the first time listening to A Love Supreme, I literally called my drum teacher the next day and I said, I just want to play hard bop for the rest of my life. And that's kind of where it just became, I want to play jazz.
What was the first live show you saw that blew your doors down?
Funnily enough, and this is another weird answer, it was this band called Death Grips, which is an underground hip-hop group. It's like industrial hip-hop. It was, you know, it's like mosh pit style, Scary Noises hip-hop. And that blew me away because the MC, his name's MC Ride, and the drummer's name is Zach Hill, and they were doing whatever they wanted to do. You know, they didn't really care what people thought. They were like, this is our artistic expression. This is what we're going to do. It's not going to be popular, but we love it. And I was like, that's what I want. You know, I want to make music not worrying about what are people going to think, but instead worrying, how am I going to express myself?
So as we emerge out of this COVID, I mean, things are obviously happening and it's not going to slow down. How do you see the world of the jazz community and you being a part of this jazz community coming back stronger from what we've learned throughout this? I mean, this period has been a hugely reflective period, and obviously, you know, you have noted that, you know, this album pays homage to that idea of cleaning up and getting out of addiction. It's almost as though we've all gone through something major and we're all recovering and we're all coming out of it and we're hoping it's in remission. What do you think the jazz community is how do you think it's gonna emerge stronger, and yourself?
Yeah, so I think the jazz community as a whole, I'm worried that it's not going to emerge stronger. That's not because I think that it's necessarily not going to, but I worry because, you know, this music is such an interactive art form. I mean, a lot of, you know, the gigs obviously stopped and the jams obviously stopped, but like some of the most influential and important clubs in Denver closed, like El Chapultepec, because of this pandemic. And I'm worried that jazz artists will forget that this music, while it is definitely about human interaction first and foremost, this music is also something that is inside all of us. And I think that coming out of this pandemic, to remember, you know, to come out stronger, I think jazz musicians, myself included, we have to remember that this music is inside of us. And we can take something original and present it to people and then turn on the interactive part. And by that I just mean instead of, playing standards, which I love playing standards and I love playing tunes, we have to remember that there's something new inside of us, and we should bring that to the table to bring into the interactive art form of jazz. So coming out of this pandemic to be stronger, I think jazz has to turn its focus to original composition and forward-moving musical ideas as opposed to how can we interact over a jazz standard. And for myself, to come out of this pandemic stronger, something that I've thought, and this is kind of the same feeling that I felt right when I got clean, is, man, I have to take advantage of my life, and I have to take advantage of every day, because gigs aren't granted, Like I lost 60, 70 gigs in a week, because I had myself booked out over that summer of 2020. And I have to remember that this isn't a guarantee. The only thing that is a guarantee is the music that's inside me. And I think that's really important just for all of us to remember, is the music is inside us, whether or not we're able to play it in a club.
So if you could get into a Jazz DeLorean time machine and go back in time and see anybody in the history and the annals of jazz, see them live and maybe talk to them when they get off stage, who would that be?
That's a hard one, because there's so many. I mean, my first thought was John Coltrane. Like I said, A Love Supreme was the record that woke up this love for jazz in me. But that being said, Coltrane had, even though he did die young, he had a pretty long life of recording. So I think, honestly, if I had to go back and hear someone live, I think it would be Eric Dolphy. I mean, Eric Dolphy's story is tragic, right? He died of a totally treatable disease, diabetes, at a very young age, and because of that, wasn't really able to put out a lot of records. And I would have loved to see him play with, like his record Out to Lunch. I would have loved to see him play with that band, just to see where he was headed. And I don't know, I love his super experimental takes on things. I know that this record that I just wrote is pretty, all things considered, pretty straight ahead. But I just love, again, that freedom of, I'm going to play this music the way I want to play it, and if you like it, cool, and if you don't, this is me expressing myself. So I think it would probably be Eric Dolphy.
So everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life. You're in control, and you have a perception of you. Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? I was at CU for a while, CU Boulder, doing a jazz studies degree, and we had a master class, and I even forget who it was, but this guy said, I'm just a human being who every now and then has to pretend to be a professional jazz musician. And honestly, that's kind of how I feel. Like, I love jazz and it's my entire life, and I take music super seriously. And all that being said, I feel like, a lot of musicians would get imposter syndrome. And I feel like, honestly, like, I go into the studio, I go to a jam session, I go to a gig, and I'm pretending to be this professional jazz musician. So my perception of myself, I guess, is I'm a creative, recovering drug addict who sometimes pretends to be a professional drummer. And I have a lot of fun pretending to be a professional drummer. Now, I know that I am actively a professional drummer. Like, I understand that. I just know that for me, it feels like this fun thing that I get to do that, I know this, it probably sounds really weird, like pretending to be a professional musician, but that's really what it feels like to me. Like, I feel like most people, everything's, if we want to get all crazy about it, society, everything is a social construct. So I'm just pretending to be a professional musician and expressing myself. That's kind of how I view it.
I like it, man. That's a great answer. Brennen, thank you for opening up. I appreciate your time today. Good luck with the album and the return to the stage.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and for listening to the album and for helping, spread the love of music and spread the love of my music.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview. We'll give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Denver, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Brennen for his time, music, and story. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.